Bonjour, mis amigos. Welcome to the latest episode of Games Up Podcast.
Where did this come from?
I don't know. I'm tired. How are you?
I am good and less interesting than you by the sounds of it.
Thank you. I think. Ladies and gentlemen, that's Lewis Crawford. I'm Cameron McCulloch-Keeble, and this week we don't have an indie game of the week because
I'm lazy.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. So let's do some news. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, sure.
Nondescript. So this week,
hyping this up.
Yeah, clearly. This week we start with the E3 floor plans that were revealed in a couple of, I guess, leaked documents, but they're not like all that secret.
No, I mean they're available if you're, I think, attending. It's actually the maps on the official pages, so
it's like they're kind of like health and safety documents of like what the floor's going to look like in space and all that kind of jazz.
Yeah, basically
every event has them, so. Yeah. They do show some interesting things about what we can expect from the conference, though. Although there's a big caveat on this that people from Microsoft are saying that this is not the case, that these documents are not up to date. Take that with a pinch of salt if you feel so inclined, because Microsoft seem to have a fairly small floor space this year, while Sony and Nintendo have pretty massive floor space. Square Enix have a large space as well, taking over Microsoft's old space. That seems to further suggest that we might be expecting quite a large presence from them. Konami has a big meeting room this year. Epic Games have gone from a tiny meeting room to a full, huge presence on the show floor. Apparently 2 times Microsoft space. That's mental.
Yeah. Well, it kind of shows you what size we're talking about when we say that Microsoft Place has gone down a lot. Especially when 2 years ago they had something that was the same kind of size as Sony's and they were very even on the E3, and now they seem to be dialing it back, even though we've been told, as you say, that Microsoft has said that actually this year is going to be a big year for them at E3. We just kind of have to wonder where.
So a couple of caveats about this. E3 is taking less and less space in the actual E3 conference. So it's entirely possible that Microsoft is pulling an EA and like having a fan space separate to E3 or in a different place. Lots of these companies, especially more indie people, choose to have their own meeting spaces or meetup locations, usually because they're a bit cheaper than booth space at E3, but also because they allow a little bit more flexibility about how and where they show the games. So it's entirely possible that we don't hear from Microsoft until they announce their plans, or we don't see any kind of accuracy about how big or little a presence anyone will have until the actual event. But this does give us a couple of little hints. It seems like we can be expecting big things from Activision, Bethesda, potentially Capcom, maybe Konami, who'd have thought that, and Squeenix.
Yeah. As we said before, I think Bethesda's the one that's interesting. The word on the street, the rumor, is that we're going to be hearing from Starfield, which was a futuristic space RPG that was being made by Bethesda. Although at least it was rumored to be being made by Bethesda. Because I think we said it in the last episode, we're in a place where we are thinking that Bethesda are unlikely to do what they did this year and bring like 3 games out published by them. We're actually looking at something that's probably going to be made by the main Bethesda team. And if that's the case, we're talking like, Fallout, Elder Scrolls, or something else. And I think realistically, they said that they're working on. They said last year that like Elder Scrolls 6 is going to be a while. We only just had Fallout 4, so it seems realistically the only thing to expect is something else, and it has to be something big.
I mean, it could be something not big. It could be that they have a big floor space because they don't have a conference. It could be that they have a big floor space to keep the precedent rolling. But it is a lot of cost to put out if they're not announcing something. So yeah,
it's a lot of cost.
That's a good money bet right there.
Yeah.
Couple of you put them in less noteworthy. I kind of think this is pretty noteworthy. Is ArenaNet, the guys who make Guild Wars, have a presence here for the first time since 2003. Guild Wars 3 would be big.
Yeah, no. Guild Wars 3 would be really big. There's it's very interesting because I think the last time they came here, they're known for going to different performances to just kind of promote the game. Like, you remember when we went to EGX that they had like a presence there as part of like people selling PCs and Twitch. But this is them going as ArenaNet, which is really quite interesting.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So this would suggest that they have something to bring. And like I could see them either coming out and like doing a quality of life thing and just be like, hey, Guild Wars 2, it's still running. You can still like join it now.
I'd love that.
It's still there, you know, like that, like.
And
it's the kind of trailer when they come out.
One last thing on the stage. Please welcome ArenaNet. Hey guys, Guild Wars 2 is still here.
Yeah. Well, it's, you know, like, it's the kind of trailer they come out and it's like 5 million players. I don't know. Yeah, and that's kind of like the big thing. So it could be something like that. I don't know if it would be Guild Wars 3, but it would be cool if they announced it and then kind of started making that a thing, you know, in a few years' time.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It could be there in support of something rather than actually announcing something, because MMOs tend to have that kind of lifespan. A couple of other things that may well be rumours either connected to E3 or just connected to some news this week. The first is Devil May Cry 5. Apparently, is it not Devil May Cry 6 at this point?
People ignore DMC. So there was a game that came in, but it was basically a spin-off and it wasn't made by the main team.
Okay.
It was made by Team Ninja or Ninja Theory, one of those two. But yeah, so it wasn't really considered part of the main game, where the rest of it is like a series. This was a spin-off. So it's DMC5. The rumor has it, and the rumor is, I'm not going to say all but confirmed, but like you know, like someone leaks a rumor,
mm-hmm.
and you look at it and it's got like so much detail to the point where you kind of go, either someone has spent a really long time fabricating the story, or there really is some truth to this.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's quite suggestive that there is some truth to this. And it's the right time set as well. If you look at like the you know, IMDb pages of the people involved in those teams that made Devil May Cry 4, we're looking at this kind of time period. Now, the PS4 exclusive thing is kind of a bit strange because that's a new suggestion. You know, like the other games weren't exclusive, so it's interesting, and I don't know how truthful it is, but it's one of the things they could bring to E3 that would really have a massive impact.
So the big rumor is that DMC5 is coming out this year, is being funded entirely by Sony, and is being a PlayStation 4 exclusive on console, at least. I believe the suggestion is that it comes to PC as well. I don't really know what more to say about this. You've gone into a great deal of detail there about what seems reasonable here. I don't think it's too unreasonable to expect it to be a PS4 exclusive. It's one of those games that will sell really fantastically both sides of the pond. It will do well in America, but it will also do well in Japan. And that's the kind of thing that Sony's probably looking at to take advantage of their market share. So yeah, that seems fairly trustable. In other rumour news this week, apparently we are getting a remastered trilogy of Spyro the Dragon. This has been a thing that people have been asking for a while, especially since the news of Crash. And in relation to that, the Spyro Trilogy Remaster will have a 1-year period on the PS4 before moving to other platforms, which is apparently the same for Crash Bandicoot, so we should expect to see some news around that exclusivity and what it means and what it will change to be around June this year, which is when a year after Crash came out last year.
Yeah, so Spyro would almost certainly, if it was announced, it would be at E3. Yeah. Again, on the Sony stage. And then I imagine we'll hear an announcement from Crash, but it won't be at E3 itself. I'm not too sure. It depends, because I don't know if these exclusive deals sometimes also have like non-disclosure, you know, in a sense that you can't like talk about it until post-June. But that also wouldn't surprise me because they've been very like silent on that front.
I could see Crash being on somebody else's stage.
Maybe. I think if we see Crash on Microsoft stage, then it's a good sign. at the very least.
I don't know. The only other way I could see them doing it is maybe it's a 1-2 punch of announcements. So like maybe Sony announced like a Game of the Year version, and it turns out to be coming everywhere, and then they lead into Spyro. They've done that kind of thing before. I think some kind of Game of the Year version is like I doubt it will be the same box just with a different console, if that makes sense, because of the DLC and the success that the game had. I imagine they're going to want to sort of repackage it in some way. So that announcement, if nothing else, if that does happen that way, would make sense to be on somebody's stage. It's just a question of who.
Okay. Yeah, I can see what you're coming with that. Yeah, maybe.
And in a final piece of news this week, EGX Res announced one of their major guests for this year, and it's quite impressive. EGX Res will be hosting Tim Schafer, the legendary developer from Double Fine and responsible for a huge amount of video games, Brutal Legend, so many games that you know. He will be doing meet and greet sessions as well as actual talks. So if you are interested in getting into game development or the indie game scene, or you want to report on it or cover it and you want to be in the presence of a gaming legend, Tim Schafer will be at Tobacco Docks with EGX Res this year in March. I think actually it might be April this year. But yeah, that's pretty cool. So that leads us on to our last news story and our topic of the week. And our news story is that this week, from the ashes of Udraw, THQ seems to have kind of come back to life. THQNordic are a company that were formed in recent years, I want to say, from a group of developers who decided to rebuild a studio with some of the IP and the name THQNordic. And they, in the last week, bought a company called Koch Media. That's Koch. God damn it.
Go on, get through it. You can do it.
I'm going to. Koch Media, fuck you. Koch Media own Deep Silver, who are responsible for a number of the IP that THQ dropped when they died, thanks to that tablet drawing game, most notably Dead Island, Red Faction, and a number of others, including Saints Row, Homefront, Metro, a fascinating series of IP, which kind of leads us to believe that THQ, although now under the name THQNordic, is basically back with the same developers' IP and opportunity to release some games. So what do we want to see from THQ? What kind of stuff should THQ do to survive again?
Yeah. I think for me that like THQ were an interesting one when we were young. They were responsible for a lot of great games, but also a lot of like bad games, like shovelware games, if you like.
Yeah.
You know, they were the people that made like SpongeBob video games, but they also were the people that were involved in making Red Faction Guerrilla, and you know, and I would love to see the quality of those games come back again. Personally, I think Red Faction would be really exciting, especially in this day and age. I would love to see something of the style of Red Faction Guerrilla, but updated and remade for like 2018. 2019, whatever. Because that game, we haven't really had anything that's similar to that, and has tried to like strive to be the same kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
With destruction mechanics, I guess like Crackdown feels like a kind of similar. I know it's a strange link, but it has like a similar premise as something like Red Faction, where you're going around and you can destroy stuff and everything's kind of destructible. Was the beginning premise, at least.
You're totally right, and I think it would be, on one hand, fascinating, on the other hand, utterly hilarious if THQNordic were able to purchase Red Faction, and because there's a massive rumor at the minute that Red Faction Guerrilla is getting a remaster. There's been like certification for it. There's been leaks about it, so it's entirely possible that this is kind of part of their business plan. And at E3, on somebody's stage, or not on a stage, just part of E3, they announce, hey, one of the first releases post becoming THQ again, kind of, is one of our most beloved games, Red Faction Guerrilla. That would be hilarious, because it would mean that in the time that Microsoft has delayed Crackdown by a third year, THQ will have bought the most well-loved Destruct game and released it.
Yeah. But yeah, there's tons of things I'd like to see. I think Saints Row has pushed itself into a corner where you can't really make another Saints Row game. Because I think like what's it, Sunset Overdrive is very much driven um, in a similar-ish direction as Saints Row. It comes from a similar place. And then Dead Island would be nice if there was. Wait, wasn't Dead Island 3 meant to be a thing, or Dead Island 2?
Dead
Like
Island 2
ages
is
ago, forever
absolutely
ago.
a thing. And I believe it's still being developed. I'll take a look into that one.
The news says Dead Island 2 is still alive. Deep Silver insists. There you go.
Because it was like quite a respected trailer when it came out. It was like a very different tone to the rest of the Dead Island trailers. It was super sort of upbeat and jumpy and happy and sort of satirical in that way.
4 years ago.
Fuck me. I remember that.
Yeah. It's 4 years ago. Yeah, so it would be nice to see something from that as well.
So
you have to wonder about the timing and whether this affects Deep Silver actually already being at E3.
that is a really good question. So according to some information I have in front of me, after the acquisition is complete, because they've bought them, they just have to acquire the parts of them now. That takes a little bit of time. After the acquisition is complete, Koch Media will operate as a subsidiary of THQ Nordic, and there are currently no plans to do any cost-cutting measures or changing to operational brands. So basically, it seems like what they've done is bought it to reap in the benefit, but allow it to continue to operate as it has. I suppose they may put a little bit more pressure on it to look at certain brands or certain IP that they now have hold of, especially as this is like a coming together of two major brands. So THQ Nordic owned a lot of IP from THQ before they bought Koch Media, so they own like Jagged Alliance. I believe they own Darksiders. I think that's coming from THQ Nordic. So now it will be a sort of conglomeration of all of the IP that THQ once owned. You're totally
I'm happy
right.
to see them back.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I part of the reason I'm happy to see them back is because like THQ is a fairly big touchstone from my childhood. Like I remember the THQ had like a big part in a number of the games that I loved because they were the middleware developer, as you mentioned. They made really impressive high tier stuff, but then they also made like kind of crappy movie tie-in things. As a child, they were like the movie tie-ins that I played. So yeah, it's good from a nostalgia thing that THQ is back. And to be honest, I kind of hope we see them become a bit of a middleware developer again. I know that sounds a bit odd, but something the games industry is struggling with at the minute, I personally feel, is having a lot of interesting IP, but kind of having it all hit at once. Like, you get those two main periods throughout the year where you have massive AAA stuff, and it's hard to kind of filter through and play the right things, and it's why the indie scene has had such success, because indies can release a 5-hour game next week, and you'll probably be able to pick it out and play it more easily. And I think it would be nice to have that kind of slightly less intense, slightly more jagged round the edges developer come in and offer a bit more like variety, not just in terms of the genre of game and the type of game, but the actual playing experience of it and the value of it.
Yeah, and I would like to see. You have to think that THQ back in the day were up there with EA and Activision, or at least close to, as in like in terms of money, and they had an awful decline.
Mm-hmm.
And while it's worth saying this isn't the same team or the same group of people, it's nice to see the IP and the kind of brand restored.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think like it is something we do need is having a space where like middleware, or if you want to say AA games, can be back up there again. And we're not kind of looking at a world where we have like you have to have every game as being like a 10 out of 10 or like an indie game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an odd situation to be in, to say like I'm a big fan of that brand and that company. I hope they don't make something that's perfect. But I kind of do. Like THQ, almost one of the charming things almost about THQ was that you could sort of their lineup was always going to be a surprise. Like THQ were the people who made Dead Island and Red Faction and Udraw and Jagged Alliance and this, that, the other, and they never really, like, Rockstar make open world sandbox games, so GTA, Red Dead, but they're but they have a formula. I imagine that Rocksteady will have a formula. The Naughty Dog have a formula. THQ kind of didn't. They were something you could bank on for being something you can't bank on, and that would be really exciting if they can bring that kind of middleware variety back in a way.
Yeah, no, definitely, and I think it's something we need more of. And that you could always expect THQ to bring something new every now and then, instead of more of the same or more of the formula, as you say. Yeah.
So specifically, there are a couple of things I'd like to see them do. I would like to see them make a new Saints Row, and I think it wouldn't be too out of the realm of possibility to do it. I think you could not reboot the series, but I think you could take it a little bit back to the more plausible madness of the third, or sort of somewhere between the third and the fourth, and have it sort of be a more, what's the word? Not accessible GTA, because accessible isn't the right word for that franchise, but like
a more fun. I don't know.
No,
I think
like a more, almost like a more indie GTA, like something that has the kind of charm of what makes GTA great, but it doesn't have the level of intense polish that makes GTA something special. It instead is a little bit kind of charmingly rough around the edges, if that makes sense.
Yeah, okay.
I'd also like to see them make another Red Faction. That goes without saying. I genuinely think Red Faction is one of the most underappreciated series in a long, long while.
Yeah, definitely. And I played all the games growing up. And like Red Faction Guerrilla even now does like some stuff that we don't see in games. We don't tend to see like destruction to the same kind of level. Like it's the only game that, and actually the sequel, which isn't amazing, Red Faction Armageddon, but is alright. Both of those games they allow you to destroy so much stuff that they had to introduce like a beam that like undoes the destruction, because otherwise you can like ruin your progression in the game. And not many games kind of give you that freedom.
Yeah, I think those are the two major things I'd like to see out of them. Anything that you'd like specifically?
Out of this acquisition, not so much. I want Darksiders 3 to be good, which is a big one, because they showed us gameplay for that before, and it was not maybe the best gameplay, but it was like an early build, so hopefully that will come out and be good. I think we're likely to hear from that really soon.
When's it out? It's out really soon, isn't it? I feel like it's April.
I don't know if it's got an announcement. I think it's just released this year.
Okay.
So yeah, like we should be seeing that, and I hope that if that goes down well, then I think that THQ are on a good position to like rise again, if you like.
Excellent. Well, it was a slightly slower news week. Slower. It was a slightly slower news week this week, Moneypenny. But yeah, THQ has risen from the ashes of its former tablet drawing self, and E3 seems to be starting to ramp up, even though it's only February.
Yeah, the news is coming a lot earlier this year, and I think actually that says a lot about how well it's been organized this year. I've heard from a few sources that like lots of people already have their press passes, and that's usually like done a lot later.
That's interesting. I wonder why there'd be so much. Like why they'd be so much further forward on it.
I think maybe I think they're just really organized this year. I've heard from a few sources that they normally get like press passes, like they apply for them and it takes them like months or like weeks to hear back. And like from quite a few sources, they've said they applied for them in early January and they got them like the next day.
Wow. Okay.
They're being really good on it.
E3 has been facing a rising tide of skepticism the last couple of years. Maybe this is their like smooth sailing show that cements where they are in the industry.
Yeah.
Cool.
Maybe a good one.
All right, well, look forward to that. Look forward to what THQ puts out, and we will see you next week. If you like the show, feel free to join us on our Facebook page or our Twitter page. They are both at Games Upcast. Feel free to like the show on here so that we can get out in front of a few more people. We'd really appreciate it. Subscribe to it so you don't miss anything that we post. It's 6:30 on a Monday every week on YouTube, and earlier that day on iTunes, and we will see you then. Thanks very much. That was aimed at you.
You're welcome.
Sorry, I should have been more clear on that. And thank you all for listening. We'll see you then. Adios.